This is the second in the series of balancing equations. We're going to do decomposition. Just a reminder, decomposition is when you have a compound and it falls apart into one or more reactants. We cannot change the subscripts. All we can do is add coefficients in front. Those coefficients would multiply everything after it. I like to keep track. I put my elements that appear on both sides in the center and keep track of my reactants on one side, my products on the other. So that too just applies to silver. I have 2 silver and 1 oxygen. I don't have any subscripts after silver, so that means I only have 1 and I have 2 oxygen. All right, I'm going to balance silver first. I would need to multiply 2 to 1, so find silver, put a 2 in front of it. It just affects silver, so now I have 2 silver. On this side, I need to multiply 1 by 2, so I'm going to find oxygen. I'm going to put a 2 in front of it, and that changes silver oxygen to 2, but I also have to change silver to 2. So I'm going to reset silver on this side. Okay, I only have 1. For me to get, 2 by 2 gives me 4 silver on that side. For me to get 4 on this side, I would need to multiply this by 4. So I'm going to put a 4 in front of there. That gives me 4 silver. When you're done, double check. 2 times 2 is 4 silver, 4 silver. 2 times 1 gives me 2 oxygen, 2 oxygen. Even though there's not a number here, it doesn't mean I have 0. I have 1. You can put a 1 in there. We typically leave it blank, but if you want to just remind yourself that you don't have 0, you can put a 1 in there. All right, moving on. This one, I've got silicon and I've got chlorine. On the reactant side, I have 1 and 4. On the product side, I have 1 and 2. Looks like silicon is balanced. Chlorine is not, so I would need to multiply this side by 2. I'm going to find chlorine, put a 2 in front. That gives me 4. So now everything is balanced. That one was fairly easy. And a reminder, it's not 0. I would have 1 of each. Okay. This one's a little tricky. I've got hydrogen and I've got oxygen. But notice that oxygen is in 2 different places on this side. So I'm going to keep track of oxygen separately up here. All right, I've got 2 and 2, 2 hydrogen, but I've got 3 oxygen. I want to point something out. That's an odd number. So if I multiply that by an odd number, I'm only ever going to have an odd number of oxygens on this side. I'm never going to have an odd number on this side. So we have to be careful about what we put here. I cannot put a 3. Okay? So I've got 2 oxygen here, 3 here. I know I need more. I'm not going to put a 3 on this. Let me just double this. Let's start with doubling it. If I double it, now I've got 4 and 4. So I've got an even number of oxygen. For me to get 4 over here, I would need to multiply this by 2. If I multiply this by 2, that changes this number to 2. Plus 2 more, I have 4. So you have to be careful and pay attention to your oxygens. Balance those separately. Let's double check. 2 times 2 is 4. 2 times 2, 4 hydrogen. 2 times 2 is 4 oxygen. I have 2 oxygen there, plus 2 more gives me 4. We are good to go. All right. This one, I've got 2 silver and 1 sulfur. 1 sulfur and 8. I'm sorry, 1 silver and 8 sulfur. So for me to get 8 on this side, I would need to multiply this by 8. Find sulfur, I'm going to put an 8 in front of it. but I also need to multiply this by 8. So I have 16. Sulfur's balanced. On this side, I would need to multiply this by 16. So I'm going to put a 16 in front of that, and now I'm balanced. 8 sulfur, 16 silver, 16 silver, 8 sulfur. Again, got one there. All right, I've got 3 elements in this one. I've got potassium, chlorine, and oxygen. 1, 1, and 3. 1, 1, and 2. So I'm going to come down to oxygen. I would need to multiply this side by 3. Find oxygen, put a 3 in front of it. That gives me 6. I would need to multiply this side by 2. There's my oxygen. That gives me 6 oxygen, but I need to change chlorine, and I need to change potassium. So I need to multiply this side by 2. Find potassium. It not only changes potassium, but it changes chlorine as well. All my numbers match up on both sides. 2 potassium, 2 potassium. 2 chlorine, 2 chlorine. 2 times 3 is 6 oxygen. 3 times 2 is 6 oxygen. All right. I've got sodium, chlorine, and oxygen. I've got 1, 1, and 3. 1, 1, and 2. This is very similar to the last one. I'm going to multiply this side by 3. That gives me 6. I'm going to multiply this side by 2. That gives me 6. But that also changes chlorine, and it changes sodium. So I need to put a 2 in front of sodium, but that also changes chlorine. 2 sodium, 2 sodium, 2 chlorine, 2 chlorine. 2 times 3, 6 oxygen. Whoops. This should be a 3. Sorry. 3 times 2, 6 oxygen. Yeah. Sometimes you may run across word equations. With word equations, you need to switch the words into actual formulas. So I underline everything that's present. Remind yourself of your diatomics. Those are your diatomics. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Aluminum oxide is an ionic compound. Aluminum's going to be your, I'm going to write them above here. Aluminum's going to be your positive ion. It will lose 3 electrons. Oxygen is your negative ion. It gains 2 electrons. Those charges do not zero out, so I'm going to cross and drop. I get Al2O3. Oxygen is a diatomic. Aluminum is not. So I've got aluminum and I've got oxygen. On this side I've got 2, 3, 1, and 2. So let's start with oxygen. I would need to multiply this side by 3. I'm going to find that, put a 3 there. That gives me 6. I would need to multiply this side by 2, so I'm going to put a 2 in front. That changes this to 6, but I also need to multiply aluminum. So that gives me 4. So now let's balance this side. I would need to multiply by 4. That gives me 4. So I'm 4, 6, 4, 6, all balanced. 2 times 2 is 4, 4. 2 times 3 is 6, 3 times 2 is 6. I hope this helps. Check out the other videos for different types of reactions.